welcome to Women and Identity. Today we've got with us Sofya Bourne, who's from Onfido, an Entrust company, and Sofya is Senior Customer Researcher. So Sofya, it's great to have you with us. And how did you end up working in identity? Everyone's got very different journeys. What was yours?
Yeah, mine was very unusual and very original. So my background is actually in international affairs. That's what my bachelor's masters are in. And for a very long time, I worked in international development and humanitarian aid area. So very, very different to what I do now. But through a series of quite fortunate in hindsight events, I've come to discover human-centered design in my penultimate job in that sector. I was a policy researcher at a think tank in London, looking at alternative ways in which organizations can become more adaptive and more flexible, specifically trying to find examples in industry and apply them to humanitarian programming. And that's kind of how I stumbled across agile ways of working and human-centered design. And specifically that philosophy and that way of working really captured my imagination. It felt very novel and very also common sense. It's like, yeah, of course you know, ask people who you're building for about their needs and like understand their experiences and then design products and services for those needs. And so I got very interested in that and innovation, and started slowly moving into humanitarian innovation space. And then ultimately, I just wanted to go into industry full on and really learn as much as I can about, well, how is technology built and how are these cool innovations actually built in tech companies. Stumbled across a job offer or a job posting from a company called Onfido. They were still a fairly, new and growing startup in London at that time. And I think what really sold me on working at Onfido was the mission. It was all about seeing digital identity as central to access and to enabling access online for online services and for this kind of the brave new world of digital that we all live in now, especially post-COVID. And yeah, it sort of, again, captured my curiosity, captured my imagination. And I thought this feels both in line with my interest in innovation and human-centered design, and also in line with kind of the, I guess, more social aspects that I was still kind of nurturing from my interest in international affairs of, well, how can we help people, but with technology in this case?
Amazing journey. And it's so important, isn't it, that the human is at the center of design. And absolutely, ID is central to access. So important. And so on that count, I just wanted to ask you, why for you in your role is identity, inclusion, and women and identity's vision important?
Yeah, I mean, still there's way too many products and services, unfortunately, today that are built by a very small, homogenous group of people, right? And I do think that diversity in design, it's not just an add-on, like it's central. It's central to this idea that for us to build products and services for people, we need to understand their needs, their desires, their worldview. But I think it can be quite easy to lose sight of what we actually mean when we say we're building for people, because that in itself is a very homogenizing word. I think it's kind of like, oh, it's like this, mass of individuals that may seem like they're all the same. But actually, if we really think about it, just the diversity of attitudes and behaviors and people's expectations and experiences when it comes to identity across the world is astounding. If you speak to an individual in Germany, they will have very different experiences and expectations around privacy, around how their legal credentials can and cannot be used and by whom and who has access to that, than to an individual, if you speak to an individual in the US. Being able to bring in individuals into the design of these systems who have an understanding, at least at the very least, are able to empathize with all these different worldviews, then you end up with technology and systems that are designed for a very particular and narrow view of identity and of what digital services access looks like. Also, when we talk about diversity, it really goes beyond just gender or race or ethnicity, right? I think cultural diverse experiences, socioeconomic backgrounds as diversity dimension is also super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Diversity is coming through really clearly. And I wondered if you could tell me a bit more about diversity and inclusion and how that translates into your day job.
For most of my time at Enfido, I've worked on consumer user research. So this is end users, and Enfido is a B2B2C company. So this is individuals like you and I using bank apps, shopping apps, what it might be, and having to verify themselves. As a user researcher, my role is to, again, understand their behaviors, motivations, problems, needs, and translate that into technical requirements, translate that into principles for design of our products, and really work very closely with our design and product teams to be able to make decisions based on what consumers actually expect and need rather than our own assumptions and beliefs about that. There are some quite standards, and I would hope that broadly used practices in user research when it comes to ensuring that your research is representative of the population that you're studying. So it's things like making sure that your recruitment is varied. So when I say recruitment, this is where you're drawing your study participants from, usually a panel. You know, it seems really simple, but it can be, I guess, quite easily overlooked. It's making sure that you're recruiting from the right geographies, that if you're recruiting from a single geography, that you're including different genders, and you're including people of different races, and you're including people of different ages, especially in technology. It's so important to make sure that, you know, you're not just serving or interviewing, you know, 20 somethings or 30 somethings who are digital native and who will have completely different experiences and even ability to interact with technology than someone from 55 plus, 65 plus, 70 plus. And then with the kind of in more recent times, I've been moving more towards strategic research and understanding our business customers' needs in some new markets. So for example, in the US is where I'm focused on at the moment. And this also involves, you know, understanding consumers, because consumer attitudes really drive business decisions. But at the same time, it brings, I've had to develop quite a lot of skills in terms of like understanding like business processes of our customers, business incentives, etc., market dynamics as well. I do find my background in both kind of broader social sciences, international affairs, and my background in more traditional user research really useful, because it almost creates a common language that I can speak to our customers in, because they say they care about customer experience or user experience, and what they decide to do and how they decide to develop their identity strategies and the identity approaches will need to be ultimately grounded in the needs and behaviors and attitudes of their user base or their customer base. So individuals, people, the general population. And so being able to speak to them in that language and being able to speak to them about the different and diverse needs of that population is really helpful, and is a really kind of neat thread that I've been able to pull through.
It's amazing to hear and speak to someone who's got such an in-depth knowledge of the user and then how to translate that into product development. Thank you, Sofya. It's been a pleasure to talk to you and hear more about what you do. And thank you to Enfido, who's an Entrust company, for our sponsorship.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.